It's Yuletide, and often in Yuletide, as you've heard me say for the last couple of weeks, I try to go along with cultural momentum if I can, just because, gosh, it's going to be going on around us. We might as well find a way to take advantage of it instead of have to either just be frustrated by it or whatever may be happening. So in Christmas, I like to take Christmas time, Yuletide, I like to take a couple of sermons and talk about Christian ideas. This is one of, or a part of one of our Unitarian Universalist sources. As many of you know, Unitarianism and Universalism are and were Christian traditions. They're Unitarian and Universalist Christianity are the traditions from which our living tradition originally springs. And then, as you've probably heard in a talk from me before, they eventually started using so much logic to try to figure out the contradictions in the Holy Book that they eventually became traditions that were like, well, as long as you're kind and logical, I guess we're all doing the same thing, aren't we? So, but you get a little topic related to the Lord. Oh Lord, save us from thy fandom. Okay, this is playing off of, have you ever seen this bumper sticker before? Jesus, save me from your followers. It's a famous one. It's a pretty famous one. We're not selling them at the boutique, although if I was a better marketer, we would have planned that earlier. Gosh, and after the service, you can get your bumper sticker. So, a couple of words on this. We can't really say, Jesus, save us from your followers, because, in my opinion, I think that's important to say, in my opinion, followers of Jesus would be people, if they were wealthy, they would immediately sell all they owned and give it to the poor. It's right there in the book. It's pretty amazing. If they were followers of Jesus, they would make sure that there was no child who wasn't taken care of, like in a healthy, wholesome environment that was, like, as far as we can manage it, not going to induce complex trauma down the road. Right? That's what a follower of Jesus would do. They would take, like, whatever, if they had lunch and then somebody didn't have lunch, they'd go like, well, here, take my sandwich and just break it up and let's see how many people we can feed off of my brown bag lunch. Like, that's what a follower of Jesus would do, at least according to the accounts that we have. So I don't think you'd need to be saved from an actual follower of Jesus. As funny as the bumper sticker is, we don't need to be saved from those followers, but we do, as the title of the sermon says, I believe we may need to be saved from Jesus's fandom. Okay, what is a fandom? Well, a fandom is a modern word for, you could say, like a subculture, right? So we have kind of like the main culture of, is there one American culture? I don't think that idea ever worked, but I don't think we can even, but you could say, oh yeah, there's Americans, and then there are Americans who like rock music. And there's kind of like a culture of rock music. And then there are people who like rock music who like punk rock music. Okay, and then once you dial it down to like, then there are punk rockers who like hardcore punk. And you're getting into like a subculture at this point. And subcultures are interesting and cute and weird and sometimes awful. Interesting, cute, weird, sometimes awful. So a fandom it's a subculture, and we'll talk a little bit about what it means. The word fan comes from fanatic, which in the Latin meant someone who was particularly divinely inspired. And it also had this multiple valences of meaning. Being particularly moved by the Spirit sometimes is really fun to have at a party, and then other times not so fun to have at your party, right? So then apparently, let's see, this baseball manager, Ted Sullivan, in 1883 claimed that he invented the term fan, because there was some windbag going off about facts and statistics. And he said, basically, I would call him a fanatic, but that would take too long. I'd be wasting too much time on it. So I'm just going to call him a fan. And he apparently claims to have invented the term in 1883. Okay, so this comes from the Latin fanus for a shrine. So a fanatic is one, like it's actually related to religiosity or religion. There's this sense of this kind of spectrum of meetings between being like, I'm kind of a fanatic about empathy and care. I don't know if you noticed. It's like the only thing that's my whole brand. And some of you might be kind of annoyed by that. And that's okay. I'm a fanatic. That just comes with the territory. It's empathy all day, every day. So that's my shrine. But then sometimes we fanatics, we get touched by the spirit. We get a little more annoying than at other times. Okay, just a side note, because I'm also a fanatic about Buddhism. This is not to be confused, just in case you're an etymology nerd, this is not to be confused with fans that blow air. Completely different terminology. That comes from the Latin vanus, and its Indo-European cognate is in the word nirvana, which is what happened to our candle earlier, which means to be blown out. So just an etymology lesson. Okay, back to the real thing. So what's in this picture? We've got Star Trek. Come on, little cursor. We got Star Trek. What's this N? Is that like Pixar or something? I don't know. I think we know what that D is. And then here are two more Disney franchises: Lucasfilm, Star Wars, and I think this is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo from Marvel. So these. Which one was that? F? Oh, that's the lightning bolt. Harry Potter, the strange work of fiction that has no author. It's very interesting. So it's, I mean, such a beloved work to be totally anonymous. So these are some of the fandoms that you will see. Have you noticed that like people who, okay, the new Spider-Man movie's coming out. I don't know if you noticed, but if you're in these scenes at all, if you're on TikTok or you're on the YouTube, people are wild over the new Spider-Man. Man, who's gonna show up? Who's the last villain? We don't. Oh, they released this scene, but they cut out a thing because they're trying to surprise us. And it's like, wow, you can spend so much time just fantasizing about what might happen in the new Spider-Man. It comes out Thursday night, by the way. I'll be there. Downtown Grass Valley. Okay. So you can get really excited about this. Star Wars. Have you seen any of these Star Wars fans? Whoa, man, you can get really intense. You could come in your jet. We come on Halloween with our lightsabers. Fandoms, they're cool. Have you ever? Is anybody a Trekkie or a Trekker? Which one are we supposed to say? Trekker. Did you go to the convention? I hear they're so cool, right? So you could get real. There's books. You may not know there are novels about Star Trek. Just side quests that you could go on in Star Trek. You could learn about the whole universe. Amazing. So these are subcultures. We see fandoms spring up around music stars like Taylor Swift, popular fandom, the Swifties. Okay, check out the Swifties if you want to know about fandoms. Around movie franchises like Star Wars or Marvel Comics, around mythos like Star Trek. Perhaps we see this phenomenon emerging in our modern age because the mythic and membership organizations of the past have lost some sway. You may notice in something to add, yes? College football teams, yeah. And Ohio State, yeah. And even around here, the Niners, you'll see people with their flags in the back of the truck. Niners, bro. It's a fandom. It's a total fandom. Okay, so we may be seeing this phenomenon because it's well known that people nowadays, there are fewer people who are becoming Masons or Elks or like part of the Rotary Club or like baking clubs and sewing clubs. Like that's not so much a phenomenon as getting the language circuits wired back up here, as it may have been in previous eras. As well, the statistics show that the amount of religious Americans is dwindling year by year. There are fewer Christians year by year. and a few more other religions, but then the unaffiliated grow larger and the affiliated with religion grow smaller every year. It may be that we see a rise in the phenomenon of fandoms because we actually need the camaraderie and mythos that this type of culture or subculture provides to us as human beings. We are seeing a rise in fundamentalist Christian rhetoric in the United States, but you might think about this as if it were a defensive reaction, like when you corner an animal. Fundamentalist Christianity is on the decline, and people who are of white or light skin tone who identify as Christians are becoming a minority. So we're not members of clubs in the way we often were. We're not members of religions in the way we often were. And perhaps the phenomena of fandoms are rising up to take the place of our need for camaraderie and mythos. So humans need the mythic. We need camaraderie. We need a sense of purpose. A fandom can give one all of this. If you love Star Wars, there's a whole universe of mythology to learn and master. You can, let me tell you, you can master the ways Force by a whole franchise of books and toys and things that you can get VIP entrance at the Star Wars land at Disneyland now, and you can, and like, how cool, right? Like this can provide a significant amount of meaning to one's life. You might even find yourself amidst a whole new and supportive community, like the Star Trek conventions that I think started the whole thing. Like, I think that was the original, like now you've got conventions for people who like Marvel and people who like DC, and then they come together and they're all dressed as comic book heroes, and like, that's cool. I think the Star Trek actually started the whole phenomenon. You might find a group of people that you can relate with through your mythos in a way that you can't relate with a lot of other folks. You share some common values. If you like the Renaissance Fair, this is a fandom that I was part of when I was a young person. If you like the Renaissance Fair, there's a whole community of weird carnival type people to get to know there. And you might even learn something about history or economics or politics along the way. Like, you might actually learn real stuff through your fandom at the Renaissance Fair. Simply put, fandoms can supply us with fun, friendship, and even a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I know that last one was long, but these are the 3 F's of fandoms that I would like to share with you today. Fun, friendship, and a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. But just like religious wars and soccer riots, they can have a toxic side too, giving rise to the dark side, 3 F's of fandoms: friction, factions, and obsession with fictions. Frictions, factions, and obsession with fictions. That wasn't meant to rhyme, but sounds pretty good. So let's dive into them. The 3 F's, dark and light side of fandoms. First one, you have your choice between friction or fun. Friction or fun. So, as with most things, you get out of it what you bring to it. Our various clubs and myths can supply us with pastimes, conventions, group activities, and play. Fun. They can provide us with fun. But we can just as easily use our hobby, myth, or cult to focus on what's wrong with others. If people don't share our winter traditions, we can declare that there's a war on Christmas. And we can use shame or dehumanizing language to speak of people who don't share our political views. These are ways, I would say, of misusing your fandom. And part of it comes from not knowing that you're in a fandom, right? You think that's the way it is, but actually you're in a cute little subculture united around certain values, and you have your choice of, you can use that to promote friction, or you can use that to promote fun. The choice is yours how to use your fandom. These are the more serious end of what can also manifest as dour-faced trekkers and Star Wars enthusiasts. They exist. They go to the convention to complain about other people's uniforms. That's not regulation. Come on. And then, oh my gosh. Well, speaking of representation, Star Trek Discovery is a really great show. Star Trek flirted with representation in a lot of its, like from Deep Space Nine on. Star Trek Discovery went all the way. They're just like really going for it. And don't look in the comments on Amazon or anywhere else, because there's a part of the Star Trek fandom that has turned toxic. There's a part of the Star Trek fandom that has turned toxic, and they're using their affiliation to say, oh, these ones are wrong and those ones are bad. And I would propose to you that's the wrong way to use a fandom. Okay, so you could have fun or you could have friction. That's part one, how to use your fandom. Part two, you could have factions or you could have friendship. Okay, this is Gandalf there. And Gandalf, what's Gandalf doing here? He's gatekeeping. He's gatekeeping, which is a phenomenon you need to know about if you're going to understand fandoms. Another way we might misuse our fandom is as a way to bolster our own sense of esteem by disrespecting others within the same fandom. So sometimes we'll use our fandom or our cult to disrespect and dehumanize our political enemies or people who don't know that the way of the Jedi is the one true way, those guys out there. And then other times we'll use our fandom to create factions within it so that we can disrespect those people who seem to share our own views. It would be weird to see that here, right? Like you wouldn't see anyone at UUFLG going like, oh yeah, well, you know, UU San Jose, they're not really doing Unitarian Universalism. Have you seen the way they light their chalice? Ah, that would be weird. But you see this a lot in other fandoms. The Christian sects, the early Christian sects and modern Christian sects are notorious for this, as are the toxic Star Wars mansplainers and some of the young men who are in particular fandoms related to their online gaming. They engage in what's called gatekeeping, when certain people are allowed something and others are kept in the realm of outsiders. So this is, it's tied in with what they call toxic masculinity in gamer culture, where oftentimes young women are gate-kept from the gaming community because it's assumed that they couldn't really be part of it. They couldn't really, and so it's a whole bummer when you factionalize your fandom. When we do this, we lose the opportunity for deeper friendship and a bigger family that is the promise of a healthy subculture. It's as if some kind of scarcity infects our minds and we think there's not enough for us to share. And so we're then forced to inhabit a limited and claustrophobic in-group when so much more is actually possible. Okay, last one of the 3 F's, fictions or a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's all one of the F's. Finally, and perhaps most relevant to our lives, fandoms become toxic when they take fictions for reality instead of an aid in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The Star Wars films famously began with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And any mythologist worth their cardigan and pipe would know that this is a signal that we're about to enter the realm of myth. It's just like once upon a time, in the beginningless beginning. And so any mythologist would go like, oh, they're talking about the inner life of humans. This is gonna be great. When we don't understand this, we might wanna try to designate public funds to find out which galaxy this happened in. Certainly we can start a congressional subcommittee so that we can find the truth behind our mythology. How long ago exactly was it that the Jedi Order started? And how many light years ago was it that the Jedi Order fell? This would obviously be mistaking a mythological reality.
The answer is 2 parsecs, by the way.
Oh. Thank you. Is that near the Delta Quadrant or the Gamma? Okay. Um, so, which galaxy did the Clone Wars take place in, or how long ago were they? Because we're speaking of inner realities, and inner realities are real in a different way than physical realities. Okay, the part where this matters. This discussion matters not only because it will help you help your children to use the urge for membership in wholesome ways and avoid toxic fandoms. Very, very important. You may not know how important this is in the internet age if you have kids or grandkids, but it's what you probably know. The internet is like a minefield right now, and we're on it more than ever, maybe because of the pandemic or maybe just because of the information age. We really need to know how these innately human urges to find community, to find camaraderie, to find what represents my values, who am I, and avoid the pitfalls of all the toxicity that also comes along with forming subcultures. So not only will it help you help your young people use the urge for membership in wholesome ways and avoid toxic subcultures, and not only because it may inspire you to join a group such as the work party next Saturday here at UUFLG, so that you can really take the most advantage of the joys of membership, the joys of creating a community that's aligned almost totally with your values. And if it's not aligned totally with your values, it's a democratic community. I mean, come on, get over here, start to make your voice heard. But not only that, but it really matters because issues like reproductive rights are very much on the table currently in the United States of America. And many of the arguments about taking them away come not from observable evidence, but from the mythic beliefs of a certain prominent subculture. If we want to be armed to combat this phenomenon, we have to know what's going on. We have to even understand that marshaling our own healthy fandom to act in unison is one of the only ways to combat the great power of toxic fandoms who believe it's their job to gatekeep another person's body. In a way, the news is good. Younger generations are much less religious than their elders. I mean, we're going to have to do some interesting razzle dazzle to keep the seats filled as a religious organization. But in a way, the news is good because the generations that are coming up are less stuck on a particular mythic view being the way it is. They're often a little more open to discussing, this is my mythic view. What's your mythic view? Let's learn from one another than older generations are. They're less religious, less fanatical, and people of common sense do outnumber cultists who will to harm those who believe differently. I need to mention some of these, what I'm also a fanatic about is pointing out cognitive biases and heuristics. Well, one of them is called the availability heuristic. And because of the way news works, if it bleeds, it leads. You might think right now that the world is full of violent, fanatical people. And in fact, this is a very, 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 very small percentage of our population. There's a very large percent of our population that wants common sense gun reform. Like if you poll people and ask them what they're open to, it's like 70%. If all you hear are politicians and all you hear are the news of the next tragedy, we might think that society is just overwhelmed with horrible and violent people who we should be afraid of at all times. But the fact is that common sense, kind people vastly outnumber fanatical and violent people. There's good news here. In one sense, it's just a waiting game. Without a great catastrophe, the world might just outgrow toxic fandoms. Without a great catastrophe, the world might just outgrow toxic fandoms. But in another sense, the situation is dire. You've seen how much a fandom can destroy in a short time because entropy is on their side. We are in many ways headed for great catastrophes other than the ones we're already in. So what should we take from this talk? While many F words may come to mind when you think about current events, I want to encourage you to think primarily about fun, friendship, and a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Fun because we need the power of our hobbies, our subcultures, and our myths to keep us afloat, even in times of great change. Friendship because we need to find ways to band together the diverse factions and tap into their great power for change. And a free and responsible search because we need to utilize the powers of our myths to inform our search for evidence-based practices. We must work to create a society based on more than just competing myths vying for dominance. Rather, we can build a world upon a foundation of evidence, compassion, consent, and common humanity. It may not happen quickly. You may need to call your representatives and ask them to expand the Supreme Court of all things, right? We're not just gonna wish and sing that song from the end of How the Grinch Stole Christmas and make it happen. It may not happen quickly or on its own. It may require another year of semi-quarantining. But building such a world is the mission of congregations like ours. And that's a very wholesome fandom to be a part of.